Okay, so we're going to be doing a straight stitch today, and I'm going to be showing you how I do a straight stitch using a sewing machine. And, using this piece of muslin, I cut. I have two pieces of that actually, and the size really doesn't matter. You could cut a smaller piece than this, or you could cut a larger piece than this, but you just want them to be even. You want them to be the same, you know, side to side, the same in length, the same in width. Okay, so you just match them together, and we're going to be doing a straight stitch, you know, stitching these two pieces together using my Singer Quantum Stylus 9960. I'm going to be showing you how I do that, and I'm also going to be showing you how to do a zigzag stitch on here as well. Okay, so let's head to the sewing machine. So when you start to sew, the stitches you're going to use most is a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. A straight stitch is used on most woven fabrics, and a zigzag stitch is used to sew knit fabrics and elastics and stuff like that. And so I'm going to be showing you how to do a zigzag stitch and a straight stitch today using my Quantum Stylus 9960, and this machine is by Singer. And if you haven't watched the video on how we threaded our machine, go ahead and check that video out. I did a video on how I thread my machine, my specific machine, and now every machine is different. Okay, so my machine tells me what foot I need for what stitch. So if you this one is number 2, but it's a straight stitch as well, and this is number 1, is a straight stitch. Now number 2 only shows with the needle to the side. You know, I rarely use number 2. I always use number 1. The needle is in the middle, and it is telling me that I need foot A, which is really the all-purpose foot that came with my single machine. There's so many feet that came with this machine, but this is what we're going to be using for a straight stitch. And if I choose this button, it tells me a zigzag stitch requires foot A as well. I went ahead and put on my presser foot, and this A foot really is an all-purpose foot. I use it all the time. And as you can see, I have sent my thread, like the needle thread. What I normally do is, you know, pass it under the presser foot like so, and with the bobbin thread, I kind of send them to the back. Okay, and then, you know, I have my fabric ready. Of course, you want to match your fabric, make sure they align, and you want to place your fabric. I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot as a guide, and so that to keep my stitches straight. Now you want to place your fabric a little bit further back from this, you know, the needle, like behind the needle. Only it's under the presser foot. Okay, so this is the needle. You don't want to place your fabric way in front of it. You want to send it a little bit behind the needle. Okay. And then you want to go ahead and drop your presser foot. You can't sew with your presser foot up, so you have to drop your presser foot down. And I'm going to be using my start and stop button today instead of my foot controller, so we can control this. And I do have this button that helps me control the speed of my speed while I'm sewing. Okay, and I also have a button here. I don't know if you can see this one. This is the automatic thread cutter, but we're going to use that some other time, or maybe I'll show you how to use that today. So we're going to go ahead and start sewing. I have it at the slowest speed possible, and this is the back stitch button. We're going to be using this button to back stitch. So when you sew a straight stitch, you want to sew maybe like 2 stitches forward, and then you back stitch 2 stitches, 2 to 3 stitches as well, and then before you continue sewing. That's just to make sure that your stitches are in place and they're not going to come apart. You know, you don't want to wear a garment that, you know, it's coming apart because it wasn't, you know, secured in the first place. It's almost like tying a knot and tying it really tightly so it doesn't come apart. Okay, so let's start sewing. we press the start button right here. Oh, first of all, before we do that, we have to drop our needle down. My needle is all the way up, and yes, I could start sewing and it would start sewing, but it would be better for us to drop the needle down. So I'm going to go ahead and drop my needle down and then start sewing. So press start and 2 and stop. Now let's back stitch. 1, 2, 3, and then we can just keep sewing now. Now, when you're sewing, you want to just guide the fabric. You don't want to pull on it or hold it really tight. The machine and the presser foot, you see, kind of, pushes the fabric forward as it sews. So all you do is guide the fabric. Maybe if it's going like to the right or it's going to the left, you just guide it, You don't want to pull on it, hold it tight, try to control it. And when you first start, that's kind of, you see, like right now it's going out of balance and I just have to guide it a little bit because I was tugging on it a little bit earlier. So you just guide it and keep it in place just so your stitches can be straight. Guide the edge there just like so. So if it's gonna go change direction, you guide it, okay? And when you first start, go at a slower pace, the slowest pace possible, so you can learn how to guide your fabric first before, you start speeding up your sewing process. So go ahead at the slowest pace possible. Don't be in a rush. So I'm gonna stop. And I'm going to back stitch as well at the end. You have to back stitch as well at the end to secure your stitches. And then you sew forward and then you stop. Okay? So you raise your presser foot like so and raise your needle. Usually you raise your needle before your presser foot, but either way. And then my machine has an automatic cutter right at the top here, but I'm not going to be using that today because I have another one at the back here, which most machines, that's what they have. And, I just go ahead and cut it. If your machine doesn't have the automatic thread cutter, you could go ahead and use a pair of scissors that you have, fabric scissors that you have, and cut the thread. Okay, so we completed our first stitch and this is what it looks like. It's pretty straight. Of course we back stitched at the beginning and at the end. Now to do a zigzag stitch, I'm going to select the zigzag stitch. And my zigzag stitch is this one, and it's number 9 for my machine, and it's also telling me that I have to use the A presser foot. So we already have that presser foot installed. We don't need to do it all over. So let's go ahead and do a zigzag stitch. Okay, so I have my fabric under my presser foot, behind my needle, a little behind the needle, not in front of the needle. I'm going to go ahead and lower my presser foot. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and lower our needle and get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a stitch backwards first. I find that a little easier, and you don't always have to stop, but normally I stop 1, I stop 2, just depending on how far back I want to go. And then I could just go ahead and start sewing now. And even with this stitch, you just guide your fabric. You don't have to do much to it, just to keep it, in place. And like I said, you don't need to push your fabric back. The presser foot has a way of, just pushing the fabric along as it sews. Okay, so you go ahead and you keep sewing. And you can always change the length of the stitches. I'm going to stop here and we're going to look at the length of this and the width of this actually. So let's go ahead and stop. And what we're going to do is back stitch 1, 2, 3, we stop. And then we forward stitch 1, 2, 3, and we stop. And we're going to raise the needle up. And see, and take note of what side your needle goes to, Raise your presser foot up. And then we're going to cut the thread. Oh, I said I was going to show you how to use this, so give me a little bit and I would show you how. And so of course I want you to see this. So this is what the zigzag stitch looks like, the standard zigzag stitch. Of course I did a back stitch here and back stitch here. This is what a standard back stitch looks like for my machine. Okay, now if I want to change that, if I want to change the length and the width, I could do that using that button. So with a zigzag stitch, you can increase the length and width or change it, whatever length and width you want it. So at this point, I decided to do a 4.5 and a 1.4 so that we could see what the different widths and lengths look like for a zigzag stitch. Okay, so I have my fabric here behind my needle. I've taken into consideration where my needle is. My needle is to this side. So I've, pushed my fabric a little bit further. And I'm going to lower my presser foot, lower my needle. Okay, so we have it set at 4.5 and 1.4. So we're going to go ahead and take a back stitch. Back stitch again. Since I'm not too far back, I'm just going to start sewing from here while guiding my fabric. Just guiding it. And like I said, start slow. With everything sewing, just start slow until you get it, until you're where you're comfortable to, go a little faster. And you can just increase your speed, little by little. There's no need to try to go too fast at the beginning, So, we've sewn long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it. At this point, I decided to show you different lengths and widths of a zigzag stitch. A zigzag stitch can be done in different lengths and widths, and I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so we've come to the end of our project. Instead of using the thread cutter in the back, we're going to use the automatic thread cutter at the front, at the top there. So you go ahead and press that, and you have to do that while your needle is still in the fabric. You don't raise your needle then cut it. Okay, and then of course you raise your presser foot and you take your project out. And let's take a look at this project. See, you see how tighter this one is, meaning that the width is a little bit the length is a little bit shorter, and as we go down you realize that both the length, like here, we go down, the length and the width are shorter. As we go even further down, you see the length and width is even shorter. As we go further down, you see that? That's a zigzag stitch. You could use this to do a decorative stitch as well. This is really, really pretty. So that's how you do a zigzag stitch, and that's how you do a straight stitch for a project. And you just need to practice those really well before you go on to learning other stitches. A little tip to help you sew better. This is a sheet of paper, so just get any sheet of paper and draw lines on it like so. I use my ruler and my pen to draw these lines and the plain white sheet of paper, and practice sewing on the lines. Okay, practice sewing on the lines using your sewing machine without it threaded. You don't need to use thread to do this. You just need to use only the needle and your foot control or start or stop button, whatever it is that you use. And practice sewing on each lines and increase the speed as you go. Make sure your machine is not threaded. This is going to help you increase your speed. It's going to help you sew in a straight line. And you can just monitor the holes that you make with your needle on these lines. Make sure they're on the line. Thank you for watching. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. and leave a comment in the section below and hit the like button. Thank you. Have a great day.